Welcome to the debut segment of Dopamine's Icon series, where we honor notable people in entertainment, music, and sports industries whose legacies continue to inspire us even after they've passed. I am your host, Kaylan Franca, and today we're honoring guitar hero Eddie Van Halen. We'll be focusing on the 1978 to 1984 era of Van Halen today because we feel this represents Eddie at his peak as a guitarist, and for many fans, this was the pure Van Halen. No disrespect to Sammy Hagar, I Can't Drive 55 is at the top of our list of rock music videos. Recorded at Sunset Sound in Hollywood, Van Halen's debut self-titled album was released in February of 1978 and would go on to be certified diamond, selling in excess of 10 million copies. Eddie's iconic guitar solo eruption popularized the guitar playing technique known as tapping, which would be copied by legions of guitarists worldwide and would turn Eddie into a guitar hero and household name virtually overnight. The album also featured classics like Ain't Talkin' About Love and Runnin' with the Devil, which would become concert staples for Van Halen for the remainder of their career. Van Halen's tour for this album saw them opening for Black Sabbath right before Ozzy Osbourne left the band. Eddie and Sabbath guitarist Tony Iommi would become close friends during this time and remain so until Eddie's untimely passing in October of 2020. Released in the spring of 1979, Van Halen 2 featured one of the band's more pop-oriented hits, Dance the Night Away. Van Halen 2 would go on to sell over 5 million copies worldwide and reach number 6 on the Billboard charts. The entire album was recorded in just 1 week. In the spring of 1981, Van Halen released Fair Warning, which saw Eddie and the band explore a more darker side. Songs like Unchained and Mean Street have a more angrier tone than previous records. Hear About It Later, which was also played on this tour, has a moody, introspective tone where Eddie uses an effect called a flanger, giving it that distinctive 80s sound we all love. Eddie has been quoted on multiple occasions as saying he was unhappy with a lot of things at the time Fair Warning was recorded. To be more specific, he was butting heads with singer David Lee Roth over what musical direction the band should take. Eddie wanted to start incorporating more keyboards, Roth didn't. Fair Warning was the least selling album of the Roth era, although it still went double platinum. In 1982, Van Halen released their 5th album, Diver Down. The band was feeling exhausted by this point, and the fact that more than half the album is cover songs, which Eddie hated, reflects this. There are some gems on Diver Down, such as Little Guitars, which features a flamenco guitar intro by Eddie, and the song became a concert staple for the band. On Cathedral, Eddie simulates the sound of a church organ using a volume knob on his guitar. Gorgeous and haunting, Cathedral remained a part of his guitar solo during Van Halen's concerts up until Van Halen's last show in 2015. Diver Down also became the band's highest charting album to that point, peaking at number 3. Things got interesting afterward when Eddie was asked to play the now infamous guitar solo on Michael Jackson's Beat It by producer Quincy Jones. Eddie played on the album for free and thought nothing of it at the time, not even thinking anybody would ever know about it. This might have been the biggest understatement of the 1980s. Thriller, released in 1982, and the album which Beat It was on, became the biggest selling album of all time, and Beat It became one of the most recognized songs in the history of popular music. Both the song and the music video had a profound effect on pop culture. During the recording of Eddie's solo, one of the monitor speakers in the control room caught on fire, causing one of the engineers to exclaim, "Damn, this must be good." Eddie never told the band about playing on the album. David Lee Roth was coming out of a 7-Eleven one day when someone in the parking lot was blaring Beat It from their car, to which he thought, "Damn, that sounds a lot like Eddie," only to find out soon after it was Eddie. Eddie himself caught hell from the rest of the band and their management for playing on somebody else's record, but he stood by his decision, and in fact joined Michael Jackson on stage a few times during the Jackson's Victory Tour in 1984. There was no new Van Halen album released in 1983, but Eddie and company still managed to make a lot of noise. On Memorial Day weekend, they headlined Heavy Metal Day at US Festival in San Bernardino, California, playing to a crowd of 350,000 people, along with bands like Judas Priest and Motley Crue. The festival was organized by Steve Wozniak of Apple, and Van Halen were paid the largest amount of money for a single performance in history that day. $1.5 million for an hour-and-a-half performance. The Clash called the band capitalists for that, and there was a confrontation between both bands backstage. But as Eddie put it, "We didn't ask for that much money. They offered it." Considering Eddie and his family had immigrated to the US from the Netherlands with just $50 and a piano, this was quite a reversal of fortune. The show, however, wasn't one of Van Halen's more memorable performances. David Lee Roth was on a 3-day coke bender and forgot a lot of the lyrics. $1.5 million for one show. Must be nice to be Van Halen in the 80s. The band hit their zenith in 1984 with the album of the same name. Unless you live under a rock, you've heard the song Jump. MTV played that video 3 times an hour after it came out, and to this day it remains Van Halen's best-known song. There are different opinions as to what the meaning of the song really is, but supposedly Roth was singing about not overthinking anything too much and instead just jumping into it, whether it be taking an action on a relationship, an opportunity, or just life in general. 1984, like the first Van Halen album, would go on to be certified diamond. Selling in excess of 10 million copies, videos for Panama and Hot for Teacher were in heavy rotation on MTV. There was trouble in paradise, though. Van Halen might have been on top of the world in 1984, but it was also the beginning of the end. The 1984 tour was so massive that none of the band members made a dime from it. All of their profits were eaten up by production costs. The ego clash between Roth and Eddie reached a boiling point, and Roth would soon leave the band in the summer of 1985. During a break in the 1984 tour, Eddie composed the music for the coming-of-age film The Wildlife. This movie was an unofficial sequel to Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and like that movie, The Wildlife is a true portrait of early 80s Southern California. The culture, the attitudes, and the free-spirited lifestyle. It's a look into a time and place that will never be duplicated. Eddie's music had a lot to do with the overall feel of the movie, which embodies a lot of the principles that dopamine represents: free will, individualism, and living in the moment. Unfortunately, only one of Eddie's songs is actually on the soundtrack album, which due to licensing issues has been out of circulation for decades. There are actually alternative versions of the movie without Eddie's music, which is unfathomable to many fans. Maybe now that he's passed on, The Wildlife will be given a proper Blu-ray release. There was no way of knowing it at the time, but the original Van Halen would play their last show in Germany in October of 1984. In the 6 years since they had released their first album, they conquered the world. Forget Beatlemania or any of those teeny bopper bands, Van Halen was a religion to their fans. Eddie's battles with substance abuse and alcoholism have already been well documented, and we don't need to get into that here. He was also a lifelong smoker, and after beating tongue cancer in the early 2000s, Eddie remained cancer-free until 2014 when he developed throat and then lung cancer. After a valiant 5-year battle during which he flew to Germany for special treatments, Eddie passed away after suffering a stroke on October 6, 2020. By his side were his brother Alex, his son Wolfgang, and Valerie Bertinelli, who he was married to for 25 years. The impact of his death was staggering and felt worldwide. There was such an outpour of love and respect from fans and other industry legends for Eddie upon his passing, and we've picked a few that resonated with us the most. Black Sabbath guitarist Tony Iommi, who I mentioned at the beginning of this segment, wrote on Twitter, "I'm just devastated by the passing of my dear friend Eddie Van Halen. Rest in peace, my dear friend, till we meet again." Valerie Bertinelli wrote, "40 years ago, my life changed forever when I met you. I'm so glad Wolfie and I were able to hold you in your last moments. I will see you in our next life, my love." After the dust settled a bit, Angus Young, guitarist for AC/DC, who Van Halen toured with in 1984 in Europe, came out with a very simple yet powerful statement, saying Eddie's death leaves a big hole. For me, he leaves a big hole not just musically, but also spiritually and emotionally. Maybe Angus meant all three? For those of us who grew up in the 80s, we'll always remember Eddie's smiling face on MTV and, of course, the amazing music he gave us. He was a part of pop culture and will always remind us of a certain time in our lives. Let's not end this on a somber note, and instead, let's acknowledge that Eddie's memory will live on in all he inspired. And that concludes the first segment of Dopamine's Icons series. In the next 2 segments, our host Katrina Miller will be covering the great Marvin Hagler and the legendary Playboy Hugh Hefner. Who would you like us to profile next? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. For Dopamine, I'm Kaylan Franca. Thanks for watching.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Dopamine Nation. And until next time, stay strong and fight the good fight.